Hello, today we're looking at Chapter 5 in Math Calculations for Pharmacy Technicians by Elaine Beal. Chapter 5 is conversions within the measurement system. So you're looking at, say, the metric system, you're going to convert from metric to metric, or if you're looking at the household system, maybe from teaspoons to tablespoons, that kind of thing. So this starts on page 88. There's a pretest. And now let's look at Chapter 5, page 90 and 91. Page 90 is about ratio and proportion. So you guys are probably used to that. That's something you learned quite early. And so the first question on example 5.2 is how many tablespoons are equivalent to 7 teaspoons? 7 teaspoons is equal to how many tablespoons? So we have a conversion factor, and the conversion factor from table 4.3 says that 3 teaspoons is equal to 1 tablespoon. Okay, so using ratio and proportion, we can set it up like 1 tablespoon over 3 teaspoons equals X over 7 teaspoons. And then we're going to solve for X. Now the way we do this is by cross multiplying. So when we cross multiply, we get 3X equals 7. And then in order to solve for X, then we need to divide both sides by 3. X equals, and then in our calculator, we can do 7 divided by 3, and we get 2.333. Or if we're going to do it in a fractional method, which household really likes to use fraction. So that's the same thing as 2 1/3 tablespoon. Okay, so now if you look on page 91, page 90 shows you ratio and proportion. Page 91 shows you dimensional analysis. Now, why would you want to learn a whole different method to doing this? There's a couple of reasons. First of all, as you go farther in college, you're going to have to deal with dimensional analysis a lot because it's what a lot of sciences use. So it's good to understand it, understand how to use it. And also, if you're doing a complex equation, you might have to do 3 or 4 of these types of ratio and proportion problems where you could set the whole thing up with one dimensional analysis problem. So with dimensional analysis, we're going to look at the same question. Here's our conversion factor. So the conversion factor is 3 teaspoons equals 1 tablespoon. So our problem that we're going to have to solve here is how many tablespoons are in 7 teaspoons. So using ratio and proportion, we're going to take the same thing, 3 teaspoons is 1 tablespoon. We want to know how many tablespoons. So we're going to put 1 tablespoon over 3 teaspoons, multiplying it by 7 teaspoons over 1. And that makes it a fraction. So we're multiplying a fraction by a fraction. So an important thing here that we need to know is, first of all, we want to start out with what we're looking for, which is tablespoons. How many tablespoons? And the second thing we need to remember is that we need to set these up so that the units that we don't want gets canceled out. So we don't want teaspoons. So teaspoons are going to cancel, and that's going to leave us with what we want, which is tablespoons. Okay? So now we can multiply across the top. 1 times 7 is 7. 3 times 1 is 3. 7 over 3. So now in this one little thing, we've gotten all the way down to this section here. Okay? So we've already gotten to the 7 over 3. And now we can just plug that into our calculator, and we're going to get the same thing, 2 1/3. Okay, so that gives us the same answer, 2 1/3. My stylus has a little button to erase, and I keep accidentally hitting that button. It's very annoying. So if you ever purchase a stylus, don't get one with a little button to erase, because it'll just keep erasing while you're trying to actually write. Okay, so we're going to do quite a bit of dimensional analysis in this class because, like I said, it's something you need to get used to because you're going to keep seeing it again and again. Also, this whole ratio and proportion thing with all these different steps, it ends up taking up a lot of space, and it looks more confusing, and especially when you have to do this 3 or 4 times. Okay, so we're going to do some more dimensional analysis. Okay, so then on page 92 gives you quite a few practice problems that you can practice with. So let's look at one of those just so we can continue the momentum here. Let's look at number 9 on page 92. So page 92, number 9. 20 ounces is equal to how many pounds? So it uses the number symbol, which a lot of you guys know as a hashtag symbol, but it really means pounds, okay? So there are 16 ounces to 1 pound. Here's my conversion factor. 16 ounces equals 1 pound. Now I want to end up with pounds, so I'm going to put the 1 pound on top and the 16 ounces on the bottom. So that's what I'm going to start with, my conversion factor with what I want on top, okay? Then I'm going to multiply it with what I have, which is 20 ounces. And I'm going to put it as a fraction over 1, okay? So this is the way these should all be set up, with what you're looking for in your conversion factor right on top, and with everything else that you don't want canceling out, okay? So now this is going to give me pounds. So 1 times 20 is 20, multiplying across the top. 16 times 1 is 16. And this gives me 20 divided by 16 is 1.25. Or if I'm doing this in fraction mode, it's going to be 1 1/4. Okay, so a lot of times people will ask, which do you want to see? Well, if it doesn't say on the question, as far as like on an exam, if it doesn't say show this, give your answer as a mixed fraction or give your answer as a decimal, these two things are exactly the same thing. So it doesn't matter which one you give, the answer will be correct, because I'm not going to say, oh, I wanted you to give it to me as a decimal even though I didn't tell you that. That's not fair, so I never do that. Okay, so let's look at which one? How about number 7 on the same page, page 92, number 7. And number 7 says 4 1/2 ounces is equal to how many teaspoons? Okay, so then we have to know how many teaspoons are in an ounce. So in our household equivalencies and conversions, it says that 2 tablespoons is an ounce. 2 tablespoons. Well, that's not teaspoons, is it? So that doesn't help, except that we know that there's 3 tablespoons. Sorry. See if I can see when I want to erase, it's not erasing. 1 tablespoon equals 3 teaspoons. Okay, so if 1 tablespoon is 3 teaspoons, that must mean that 1 ounce is equal to 6 teaspoons. And that's on the conversion sheet that I sent you guys in the files on Canvas. So 1 ounce is 6 teaspoons. So using this conversion sheet, I know that 1 ounce is 6 teaspoons, and I need to put one of those things on top. And if you look at your original problem here, I'm looking for teaspoons. So I want to put the teaspoons on top in my conversion factor. So I'm going to come back here and I'm going to put 6 teaspoons on top because that's 1 ounce, and then multiply it by 4.5 ounces over 1. Now I've got a fraction in a fraction here, and that's kind of confusing. It'd be easier if it was a decimal. So I'm going to take this 1/2 and I'm going to make it 0.5, 4.5 ounces. Now my ounces are going to cancel out, and I'm going to be left with teaspoons, which is what I'm looking for, right? Okay, so I'm looking for teaspoons. There it is. So this is the way I set these up. Now I have 6 times 4.5. In my calculator, 6 times 4.5 equals 27 over 1, because 1 times 1 is 1. So my answer here is 27 teaspoons. So 4.5 ounces is 27 teaspoons, okay? So this gives you all of the household measurements. And let's look at the metric measurement. So if you look on page 94, it's the metric system conversion. Now the metric system conversions are based on a base unit of 10. So conversions can be made within the system by moving the decimal places. It's a quick method, but you need to really understand it to make it work. So for instance, if we look at example on page 95, example 5.6. But before we do that, look at page 94, about 2/3 of the way down, there is a tech alert, okay? And it says, be careful to distinguish between micrograms, milligrams, grams, and kilograms in weight, and milliliters and liters in volume to prevent medication errors. The abbreviation microgram, which looks kind of like this. Now, to me, that looks so much like this that I never use this little symbol here. I always write MCG for micrograms because it just, you can see the C a little bit easier than you can that this thing is not really an M, it's a micro symbol. So I don't like that symbol, and I'm going to tell you guys don't use it, okay? We want to use the MCG instead. It's because there are 1,000 micrograms in 1 milligram. And there are 1,000 milligrams in a gram. So that means that there are 1,000,000 micrograms in a gram. So that can get really confusing, and it can also cause you to give somebody, make you a calculation error by an order of 1,000, and we don't want to do that, of course. So looking on page 95 at example 5.6, it says moving the decimal or multiplying. Okay, so your example is 1.2 liters equals how many milliliters? And it says a liter is larger than a milliliter by 3 place values, or 3 decimal places. So move the decimal place 3 places to the right or multiply by 1,000. So you take your 1.2 and you're going to move that decimal 1, 2, 3 places over. So it's 1,200 milliliters. Okay, now if you want to do that in ratio and proportion, that's on the middle of page 95. And in dimensional analysis, it's going to look like this. I want to end up with milliliters, and there's 1,000 milliliters to 1 liter, and I have 1.2 liters. And I'm going to stick it over 1 just to make a decimal out of it. So my liters are going to cancel out. And that's going to leave me with milliliters, which is what I want. I want milliliters, right? And what I don't want cancels out. And that tells me to multiply by 1,000. 1,000 times 1.2 is 1,200. And since it's over 1, any number over 1 is the same thing as that number. So 1,200 milliliters. Okay? So now here's the thing. A lot of people wonder, if I'm going from liters to milliliters, do I multiply? Do I divide? And it can get really confusing because all conversions are either multiply or divide. All conversions are going to be either multiply or divide. Okay, so that's something you want to remember. Okay, so make sure you remember that, because what you're going to be doing is either multiplying or dividing. So then the question is, well, if I'm going from liter to milliliter, do I multiply or do I divide? Well, you could say liters are bigger, so you're going to need a lot more of them, so you're going to multiply. But then people are like, why am I multiplying if the milliliters are smaller? Okay, so that doesn't make a whole lot of sense for some people. And remember, I've always said, pharmacy has to make sense and math has to make sense unless you're dealing with irrational numbers, which I don't do. So there you go. Okay, so we're going to either multiply or divide on these. So let's look at example 5.6. So that's still a multiply. Let's look at on page 96, example 5.8. Example 5.8, and it says 5 milligrams is equal to how many grams? Okay, so the grams is bigger than a milligram, so you're going to have fewer of them. You're going to have fewer grams, but let's look at our conversion factor again. So this tells you that you can move the decimal place 3 places to the left or divide by 1,000. It says that on page 96. So you would take your 5 and you would move the decimal place 1, 2, 3 places, and your answer is going to be, let's see, 1, 2, 3. So your answer is going to be 0.005 grams. Or you can set it up with dimensional analysis, and we want to end up with grams. Okay, so we're going to take our conversion factor, which is 1 gram is equal to 1,000 milligrams. And we're going to put the 1 gram on top and the 1,000 milligrams on the bottom. And then I'm going to multiply it by what I have, which is 5 milligrams. And I'm going to put it over 1 to make a fraction out of it. What I don't want is always going to cancel out. And this gives me 1 times 5 on top, which is 5. 1,000 times 1 on the bottom, which is 1,000. 5 divided by 1,000 is 0.005. And that's going to be grams. Okay, so grams are what we wanted, grams are what we end up with, because we started out by putting them on top and everything, and our conversion factor is 1 over 1,000 because we want the grams on top and the milligrams on the bottom. So that tells us to divide. So when you use this dimensional analysis method, then this kind of tells you whether to multiply or divide. Okay, and since all conversions are either multiply or divide, this answers the question of Which one? So I like to use a lot of color because it helps draw your attention to things. I'm hoping it's not just making it too confusing. Okay, practice problems B on page 97, give you a bunch of these. Let's look at page 98, number 29. And we're looking at a physician orders a thyroid replacement, Synthroid, 0.175 milligrams. How many micrograms will be given to the patient? How many micrograms is that? Luckily, the Synthroid bottle, Synthroid comes in at least 10 strengths, I believe, probably 10 or 11. And the bottle will show you the microgram and the milligram amount. So that's good because it'll tell you it's 0.175 milligrams, and then underneath it in parentheses it'll tell you how many micrograms, or it might be the other way around, but it tells you both, which is nice because then you don't have to do this math every day when you're trying to fill a prescription. Okay, so our conversion factor here, there are 1 milligram is equal to 1,000 micrograms. Okay, so I want to end up with milligrams. Oh, no, I don't. Look at that. I don't want to end up with milligrams. I want to end up with micrograms, yes? So I'm going to put the micrograms on top. 1,000 micrograms over 1 milligram is, then I'm going to multiply it by what I already know, 0.175 milligrams, and I'm going to put it over 1 just to make a fraction out of it. So now I've got micrograms on top. Milligrams are going to cancel, leaving me with micrograms. And this basically, when there's only 1 on the bottom, that tells you to multiply and not divide. You don't need to divide. You're just going to multiply. 1,000 times 0.175 is equal to 175 micrograms. So that's how many micrograms are in 0.175 milligrams. I'm going to pause for a moment here.